I'm Paul from London, and I love the smell of IBTM in the morning.
So welcome.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it, and it's great to see the apples here. You're the apple of my eye.
Well, there you go. We are back in Barcelona, back at IBTM. How do you feel the sentiment for this year's IBTM?
Yes, I was just. Thank you. Yes, I was just walking through the show this morning, and realised how many more people there were today than a year ago, and before that, of course, we had those difficult times. But it's great to see a buzzing show floor. I think I've got a lot less hair than I did when I came to my first show in '05. So I've clocked up nearly 20 years coming here, and it's always been a thrill, always been a pleasure. But it's great to see it moving up into another gear.
Well, you also organized trade show Confex for quite a long time, Paul. So how can you compare the Confex with IBTM?
Yeah. I think, Goraj, if I was organising Confex, I'd have no hair at all.
Okay, cool. But,
so I'm in charge of the editorial, but my colleagues are doing a very good job with Confex. We're looking forward to it in February. So, and we've got lots of good things planned. It's a very old show on the market. I think we're well over 40 years now. So it's all about finding new things and responding to that. We find the UK has come back very strongly. Confex is a very broad tent, and we make the most of our strengths at Mash Media, having publications, as you know, across the exhibition sector, outdoor music festivals. And there's just been a report published in London by UK Events, our number one body that lobbies for the industry, that shows that the industry is growing nicely, and in particular the outdoor festivals market. So Confex, we recalibrate it every year to take account to which subsectors of the industry are growing, and try to cater for that and bring in lots of new ideas. And just like you guys are doing with this studio on stage, you know, we're doing that as well. So it brings things to the fore much more quickly.
Amazing. Is it possible that AI will take over the trade shows?
Well, I was pushing for a much more beautiful avatar of myself, but unfortunately it doesn't work for me. But no, AI can save us a lot of time, of course, especially with going through data, subscriptions, all the data you need to run your shows. Obviously, you know, you still need to have that creative spark, in my view, and you know, just as the internet let a lot of people have a voice, it doesn't make everybody a journalist. And the same with AI. It's a wonderful tool that takes us into a whole new era, but you know, could be dangerous in the wrong hands, and it would be a shame to waste the power of it going down avenues which are maybe vanity projects. So it's good to see experiments with AI, but I always ask people, you know, what are the concrete results? And, you know, let's make sure we harness it for good, and to ally good old human creativity to the power to sift through all the data that none of us wants to do in person.
Because you're engaged in so many of the meetings industry activities, I think you have also through Mash Media an incredible insight into what's happening in the industry. So AI definitely is one of the big topics, and we've touched on that with Gorast quite a bit in the past. But what would you say are the other kind of driving trends right now that you feel as a pulse in the industry?
Yes. Well, referring back to this UK Trends report, I would say sustainability has actually dropped down the list as people may be feeling the economic realities a little bit more coming out of COVID. So things such as recruitment doesn't sound as sexy, but it's really a pressing point. And for our industry, which traditionally maybe hasn't paid the highest wages, we're now competing with the likes of banks and finance houses for IT consultants.
You're right.
So everybody's job has some form of IT attached to it, and AI specialists, of course, and we have to compete for that talent. So we're no longer looking at just graduates from event management courses, valuable though they are. We're in a bigger competition, and the industry needs to maybe up its salary points in certain jobs, but that's the competition we're facing.
Let's touch also the media world. So what is happening behind the scenes? There are just few media left on the market. So when I started, it was really, I would say, tons of printed media, also some digital ones. So what can you say about it? What is happening? What is the zeitgeist, Paul?
Yeah. Well, I think it's not just a question of the chess pieces changing, but of any exhibition organizer really is becoming a media company, because so the roles are changing and intertwining a lot, of course, but we see a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the exhibition sector, but the companies coming in tend to be backed by private equity media companies, and they know that they can sweat those assets even more across all of their different platforms. We started life, Mash Media Group, as a media company, and then grew our events. But people are doing this in reverse now as well. So, you get people at different stages of the cycle. We've always felt that the data we get from our shows is like gold, of course, and it helps us in our publishing business to put those sides together. So I think it could be hard for people if they just have an old-fashioned trade show with no real media power behind it. Yeah.
But do you still like the smell of the old school printed media magazine?
Yes.
And you're still printing, am I right?
We are still printing. It's hard to get that out of your DNA when you're an old print journalist like myself. But I think it's the analogy I use is like radio is still there, and vinyl records are still there. They're niche products. Everybody doesn't use it, and I understand the young generation doesn't read printed newspapers so much now. But to use an old anecdote, when the Russians and Americans had a space station, the American commander was showing off that his pen that wrote in space cost $1 million by NASA to develop, and eventually it breaks after 7 days, and the Russian just pulls out a pencil and gives it to him. So sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but I think there's a place for everybody with everything, and there's nothing wrong with good old-fashioned journalism, but print obviously is fading out, but there's still a place for it, especially in countries that maybe don't have access to very high-speed internet. There are countries, and it has a shelf life. And I will ask you guys the question: when you send a digital Christmas card, do you think anybody thinks about that for more than 5 seconds while they delete it? At home on the mantelpiece, I have paper Christmas cards. I'm of that generation. Not for everybody, I know, but it really means something, and I think of that person when I look at that card. But the digital footprint has gone into the ether long ago.
Well, definitely the shelf life of information is a lot shorter. There's information everywhere. We are not just accessing information all the time, but we are bombarded by information. Yes. Now, as you said, you're slowly going away from the printed, more and more is digital. What would be actually your main channels of communication when you look at the entire spectrum of communication that you use as Mash Media?
Well, we have a new video department for the past year, 18 months, and that's grown to 5 people from nothing. That really says it all. We have video newsletters, still have traditional newsletters for those who need that, consume it that way. I think you have to produce products in all forms of consumption and see what takes off and what people like.
There's also the conversation of generations kind of coming together. I think that never in human history we've had so many generations working at the same time. So, I mean, I will put it this way, you guys, you have much more experience than I do in certain areas, especially because I think you've had the unique chance to really see the changes from, let's say, that classical form of event organization to something that we would call event organization today. I mean, we're talking about a conversation that has really popped up since the time of COVID, and that is digital meetings to physical meetings. Now, coming from such a large background yourself, how do you see this conversation develop in the last year?
Yeah. Well, I would say, Jan, that the hierarchy has gone that I remember, and no doubt Goraj too. You served your time in an industry, whether it's banking or even events, but now the barriers to entry are purely on talent, and it's a good thing. And young people in our business sit round the table with our managing director, and if your idea is good enough, it gets a backing and a flying start. So that's good. It may be useful to have a few grey hairs around the table to sense check things and to make sure that we're not wasting energy on projects. So I think it's great that you have that mix of generations and a diverse workforce. But I still think that things should be done on merit, and I'm a great believer in meritocracy, and not simply have DEI hires while at the same time moving towards diversity. But I don't think should be mandated, and that way is decline in standards. So I think you have to watch standards, but be open to talent and encourage it and move along.
Paul, we talked yesterday about associations, and Jan, congrats once again for your new position at ICA in the board of directors, which is a big thing. But Paul, how good are the associations we know here, they are around us, in advocacy of our interests, I would say, and the whole industry?
Yeah. Well, I think they do vary in what they are doing and what they have done. And I thought COVID was a big acid test. And I don't want to dig out anyone in particular, but I would say let me praise though UFI and their leadership of what they did during COVID. They were really on the front foot, advocating, coming up with lots of ideas. Not everything worked, but being active. But there were some other associations that were rather passive, I would say. And it's time to realise that these associations are not just gatherings of the great and the good. They need to actually be accountable for advocating for us, because yes, we talk about our industry needing one voice and powerful voice to speak to politicians, but we really need to start doing it and not just talking about it. And yesterday's advocacy forum, it was good that there was an advocacy forum, but let's not let these things become just talking shops.
Okay. We had a conversation actually about this with Kai last year, right here at IBTM. It was a great conversation, still available on YouTube if you want to go and watch it. But talking about the industry associations, there's a lot of them, and some have been, becoming more relevant. Some are becoming less relevant. It's an organic kind of a development. How do you see the coexistence or competitiveness amongst, let's say, associations in the industry such as, PCMA, MPI, ICA, CTDNA? There's a lot of them that kind of are, we could say, stepping on each other's toes. Yes. And so you, from, let's say, a perspective of a unbiased observer, how do you see this?
Yes, well, there certainly is an alphabet soup in the industry of associations. On the one hand, of course, as you know, there are lots of specialist niches. We're not cut from the same cloth exactly, so the idea of having one association sounds attractive. It's a good slogan, but you've got to make sure that people are represented. In the UK, we had far too many industry associations, but some of them rushed to merge, partly through financial reasons rather than strategic ones, and then they lost some of the specialization. So it's not an easy process, but where it works well, for example, in Australia, I was down there last month, and they managed very successfully to bring their associations together under one big umbrella, ABEA, if I remember my acronyms correctly, and that's working well. Now, one association stood aside and tried to go it alone, partly, I think, because, those people are used to being leaders and didn't want their jobs to disappear. But practice has shown that it was the right move because the industry coalesced around it. But I haven't really answered your question, Jan, but I say that if you're doing a good job, it doesn't matter how many associations there are, but where they are crossing over on each other's turf, it is a problem. And just let's take this show. I'm having to leave tomorrow early because the UFI Congress is on at the same time. Now, maybe, and I wasn't privy to any talks about the leaders why that is a diary problem, but surely that could have been sorted out as an example.
This is actually my thinking was exactly that.
Yeah.
I think that as an industry, we've gone from no meetings during COVID, live meetings,
Yes.
to digital meetings, and all of a sudden all these digital meetings have kind of overflown into physical again, and now we have a huge amount of events that have completely are overlapping in a calendar. We've seen this year with IMEX America, with ICA Congress, with CTDNA in Bruges. We see it now, as you're saying. How do we resolve this?
Yes. Well, maybe it's the trend towards having larger shows strengthened, like this one, and IMEX, of course, and maybe some of the mid-ranking events would start to disappear, and we would have smaller regional ones, which would probably be more green and sustainable anyway. But I think you're right, Jan, you can't just have the same content at lots of different industry associations and trade shows. And we have seen ICA, for example, work with AIPC and indeed UFI. I think they called it a triumvirate last year to try and do something there, but I don't know whether that's still active or not. But I think more emphasis needs to be put on maybe opening up the content and saying, look, if you're going to tackle sustainability in a big way at this conference, there's no point us doing it a week later as well, just because you need to tick that box. We have to be more mindful, and I think we'll get called out on it by the younger generation, looping back to your previous question, because they won't stand for it. We're sort of used to it being in the old mechanism, but if somebody comes from the outside into our industry, they soon start to see what's wrong with it, and we need to react to that, I think.
Paul, last but not least, you experienced a lot of destinations in your life. This year, which destinations surprised you in a positive and which in a negative way?
Yes. Well, we're both very lucky to travel as we do, and hopefully to pass on some of what we see as best practice in the world. I know in my own country we can often be accused of being a bit arrogant, thinking that what we do is the best, but it isn't always. And from what I've seen, to answer your question, in Korea, in terms of technology, is incredible. You see it also in Hong Kong and Singapore, where they are a league above what I've seen in Europe mostly, in terms of their technological advances and deliveries. And it's great to see how they bring their industries into our industry to show that off. In terms of interesting places, for me personally, I wish I could speak Spanish, not least here in Barcelona, but I was in Colombia, I was telling you, I think, and that's a wonderful country. And hopefully now it's getting past its 1980s, 90s, drug problems, and unfortunately the promotional aspect takes a while to catch up. But that's a country that I would urge people to discover. You get a lot for your money. It has lots of different environments. The second most biodiverse country in the world. And I'm not on a retainer from the pro-Colombia, believe it or not. But and then there's Jules, of course, as your own capital in Slovenia, a wonderful place that not everybody's discovered. So even in our own backyard, there are gems to find, to polish up. And, I'd urge people to get around and share their own experiences, because what worked for one person might not work for someone else. But if we're always telling the stories, hopefully people can see what they like and where they want to go.
Amazing. Is Europe still number one? We believe so, but what do you think about it?
Me? Well, I think it probably is for meetings after America. I think America is probably number one. For trade shows, Germany's number one. So they're in Europe last time I looked, and so we've got plenty to be proud of. Yes, Europe is a big dynamo.
Europe is a big power engine. The competition is, of course, fierce. We've seen at ICA Congress, and we've heard the Middle East is really coming up. So there's exciting changes that are coming out in the industry actually from the side of the destinations and such. So that's going to be great. Because I think we are slowly coming to the point where we have to wrap up this Ljubljana talk. Thank you very much again. But we are not done yet, because we have a couple of fire questions that we shoot in your directions, and then we see how you go. So let me go Colombia or the UK?
The UK, I'm a patriot.
A classical one, beer or wine?
Beer.
Can you elaborate this? No?
Well, again, coming back to Europe, I think the Czech Republic, not too far away from you guys, that's where the real beer is, and we're also proud of our British ale. And when it gets hot, we have nice lagers too. And the wine is great, don't get me wrong, it's just not my personal taste.
Super. Well, thanks for joining us. And stay tuned. We are coming back in a few moments.
Na zdravé.
Na zdravie.